Respected Bishop, Archbishop of Calcutta, Vicar of this church, a lot of my senior friends and colleagues, Mr. Kapoor, and Calcuttans. I feel terribly embarrassed when I'm introduced with some appellation at the end of the name because that's only a way of earning your livelihood. Before I start, let me congratulate Mr. Kapoor and that wonderful team of restorers, not for the actual work of restoration, which is a continuing process, but for the interest that Rotary and they have taken in a city in which most people seem to be losing interest rather fast. This restoration, it attracted my attention and will attract yours if you look in for a few signs. The portraiture or the painting of the Last Supper went through one of those paradigm shifts after the Renaissance. Do you know what it is? Before the Renaissance, the 12 apostles were around the table. So you saw the backs of 6 of them. Okay? Post-Renaissance, all of them are arranged in a circle or in a straight line. You don't have chairs on the front. Because the Renaissance artists thought it best to show all of them together, though it's a little unnatural. This one brings in a circle, leaving just a space, so that is an innovation. It brings in both the pre- and post-Renaissance representations of the Last Supper. One of the very unique pictures I've seen. Now, coming to Calcutta, it's not very important whether this is a birthday or not, because the city can't be born on a particular day. It's not something that comes into existence on a certain day. The day is important for us to note because that would lead to what I call a new settlement around this place. That's all. Now, most people know that on the 24th of August, 1690, Job Charnock came here. Sorry, I forgot, Excellencies. My mistake in not addressing the consular corps. So most people know that he stopped somewhere here and thereafter a city came into birth. And that most probably it was an accident. Everyone was stopping and perching their bases somewhere along the Hooghly. It wasn't exactly an accident. And that's the story why Calcutta was not an accident. For the next 200 to 300 years, people would be cursing the selection of this particular city or this particular spot for the capital, for being the capital of the British Empire, because they found nothing in it that was desirable, excepting what came up due to human efforts. It was hot. It is sticky. It's on a side that was famous for its malaria, and we exported cholera to various parts of the world. But let's not look at that side. Let's get into what was troubling the Englishman and why he chose this particular spot. You transport yourself to the 1670s, 1680s, 1690s, and you'll get the picture. The British had just about asserted themselves almost as a matter of fluke as a naval power. And they were asserting themselves after the Armada. They were not accepted either as a naval power or as an army worth reckoning. British would be accepted as an army worth reckoning only after 1815, after the Battle of Waterloo, when Wellington led the Allied command and happened to be on the winning side, The most historians know that it was Marshal Blucher or Blucher who played a much bigger role. Now, coming back to 1690, what the Brits had and the others didn't have was a growing navy that had ships broad enough to take on the recoil of powerful cannons. A ship is not an ideal location for a cannon because a cannon gives back a recoil. The British had by that time come across these boats, the frigates as they call it, and they had, after their encounter with the Spaniards who had commanded the seas, picked up the power to blast off anybody on water. So what do you need to assert your supremacy? There's a Bengali proverb that says that if the crocodile wants to show you its might, it doesn't fight you with you on land. It invites you into the water. Okay? So it's something very similar. All the foreign powers were on the west bank of the Hooghly. Fort Gustavus at Chinsura was... Thanks. Fort Gustavus was in Chinsura and almost impregnable. That was the Dutch. Serampo was with the French. Bandel had been with the Portuguese, from which you get Bandel cheese, from which you'll get paneer and chana and the Bengali sweets. But the English presence was only in Hooghly. It moved on to capture Bandel, but that was secondary. The point is, on that side of the river, you were more susceptible to the Mughal Fauzdar and his minions. At any point of time, the Fauzdar of Hooghly would pounce upon you, extract his chanda, and move away. The Mughal emperor had given a farman for giving them trading rights for a magnificent sum of rupees 3,000. But that was not respected by the local Fauzdar, who behaved like a local Thanedar whenever he felt like, and he would be extorting money. More than that, the other powers would connive with the remnants of the Mughal regime, and this led to an exasperation that most traders within these communities had. So Chanak came up with this brilliant idea that if I have a stretch of water between me and everyone else, whoever steps on the water, I can blow him out to smithereens. That is a central idea of coming to this bank. Why this particular spot? It could have been further north. It could have been further south. In fact, the logical place was Hijli or Falta. Falta is the place where ultimately Clive would be landing. He chose this spot because this was the maximum extent to which the seagoing vessel could come and rest. After this, it became treacherous because of the sandbars. You didn't know how far you could go. Being a very calculating man, he chose Sutaneti, not this ghat. Sutaneti, because in low tide, there's a lot of water there, and it's called Sutaneti Deep. In the English records, it's known as Chutaneti Deep. Even if you kept your boat there, in low tide, it would not get stuck in the mud, whereas it would get stuck here. So all these calculations are written in the books of the East India Company, otherwise known as the Consultations of the Right Honorable East India Company. So in 1686, Chanak was made the factor at Hooghly. Factor incidentally meant the chief merchant, the guy who was just above chief merchant. And the unit around the factor was a trading outpost that was known as the factory. The factory does not start as a production unit. It starts as a trading unit. Below the factor would be chief merchants, senior merchants, writers, underwriters. We have left behind one of these appellations in one of the houses quite close to here, the writers. Okay, move on. So Chanak he was made Fauzdar, and he was an impetuous man. He was earlier factor at Patna from which the British procured saltpeter. Saltpeter was an essential mineral right, that was used for gunpowder. He realized the exasperation of dealing with a decaying empire of the Mughals. He was sent at Qasim Bazar. He picked up fights. He went to Hooghly and he picked up a massive row. In 1686, Chanak's men fought it out with the soldiers of the Mughals. After massacring, I think, 17 of them, the Mughals had enough. They started firing on them. Chanak would retreat in 1686 to Chutanati, take a little rest. By that time, company had enough of him. This guy and his maverick techniques, and he was reported to be staying with an Indian lady. Chanak, incidentally, was fond of wearing Indian dresses, and this is where he stands out. He realized that this sticky climate required a loose flowing dress, not the very tight breeches. So Chanak with his lady wife were, for that moment, very unpopular where the English company was concerned. And one of his company rivals, many of us who have worked in companies or in government know what rivalry means. He was knocked off and he was told to take charge of Chittagong, knowing fully well that Chittagong was a place where you couldn't penetrate because of the tough resistance being offered by the locals, warlike locals. Now, between Chittagong and Hooghly, this tete-a-tete had gone on for almost a century from the time of the Portuguese. In fact, the Portuguese called one Porto Pequeno, the small port, and Porto Grande, the big port. This had gone on, this had been going on. So Chanak decided that he actually made a try at Chittagong. He couldn't, came back here, occupied Hijli. Where is Hijli? Any idea? Kharagpur. It's IIT Kharagpur, that's Hijli. The river had come up to that part those days. So he had tried Hijli. He couldn't make his felt. He went down from Hijli. Hijli, incidentally, was the second choice for the setting up of the empire, for setting up the city. We would all be calling ourselves Hijlians or something if we had been there. So it moved on. From Hijli, he moved down to Balasore. He knew Balasore rather well, so he said, I'll take my shot at Balasore. Got sick and tired of Balasore, was posted again to Fort St. George, Madras. At Madras, he was not happy. So after 3 years, his rival, Captain Heath was replaced, and in 1690, Chanak was sent back to Hooghly. 1690 just takes him a few months to get into scraps again, bar brawls, and this time, he was more mentally prepared. He ordered his ships to be in readiness, and after the first brawl, he decided to think ahead of the company. The guns I told you, the ships I told you, is all in his mind. On the first brawl, he decides, he comes back to Chutanati and camps. So Chutanati was not an accident. Chutanati's location is exactly today Nimtola. And Nimtola to Kolkata, that's where we are standing, has a little distance. With traffic jams, it takes a longer time. Those days, it was actually Mohantos Ghat. Mohantos Ghat. He had thatched houses there. He required pakka construction because it was raining like hell. 4 days of rain. I guess you people know about what 4 days of rain is. 4 days of incessant rain. So he came over here and seized and made a deal with the Savanna Rai Chaudhary family and bought up the Kacheri house at Dihi, Kolkata. Or rather, it was known, Kolkata was only a revenue name. This was known as Lal Dighi. This was the only source of fresh water that they had. Fort William, that would be built here, not there. Fort William, the first Fort William, is where the GPO is. If you go close to the GPO, you will see this is a spot in which Fort William existed. Now here comes Chanok, takes it up. What's so great about having a sheet of water? What about being attacked from the back? You have the option. There was no way. The entire part of Calcutta, eastern part of Calcutta, was flooded with marsh, salt water marshes. And that is why the township that we have reclaimed is known as Salt Lake City. So on the other hand, you had salt marshes. On the western bank, you had the water. There's a thin strip of land that goes along the Hooghly. All you need to position is 4 cannons. You could take care of that rest. The thin strip, one major problem with the site selection. I mean, it had a lot of problems. One major problem was, normally the drainage of a city, it tilts toward the river so that the water flows into the river. Calcutta has just the reverse. The Hooghly bank is higher, and then it slopes into the salt lakes. What happens when it rains? I don't need to ask in Calcutta. What happens when it rains? There's no way we can throw it out. So what the British did was to put in diagonal pipes and pump the water into the Hooghly. So there are a series of gates known as water gates. Nothing to do with the scandal, water gates of Calcutta. And if the corporation employee forgets to close the water gate, shut the water gate, what happens? When the tide comes, water flows into Calcutta. It's come down now, but when we were kids, we used to see a lot of pool of water outside Rabindra Sadan for no fault of ours. Nobody had nothing, it was not raining, but you could see a pool. That was because of the water gate. So that was the reason for the selection. And let's move fast forward. Chanok dies 2 years later. He's succeeded by Sir Charles Eyre and goes on. But what about the rest of the city? It's too long a history to tell you, but let me tell you how Calcutta would be defined. After these 3 villages, I've talked of one, Nimtala Ghat, Mohantos Ghat. I've talked of the second, Kolkata, that is Dalhousie Square. Where's the third? Govindpur. Govindpur was another star attraction for Chanok, because as a trader, he needed a trading community to act as Dobhashi. He had to have somebody who was not a Brahmin or a Kayast or someone who could talk trade. And here were 4 families settled in Govindpur: Seth, Bosak, Sheel, and Malik. They were traders. Till 1856, the major base of Calcutta's, the major fortification of Calcutta was what you call the GPO, Fort William. 1756, Shiraz, who's then Nawab of Bengal, decides to come down and clash with the British. They had just grown a bit too much. From 1690 to 1756, Shiraz-ud-Dowla comes in and meets the first combat at a place that was famous for trade. It's at Sialda. The name of the place is Baitak Khana. It's this Baitak Khana which continues to remain one of the main trading marts of Calcutta. If people who have seen Irumala Dushan want to see Calcutta by night, early morning, if you want to see how trading is done with huge trucks of fishes, huge trucks carrying fruits and vegetables, come off to Baitak Khana at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's at Baitak Khana that you had this banyan tree under which sat the Bania, the trader, who wore a very loose garment which would later on be known as banyan, the one that we wear. The loose, it's a loose sort of a cotton garment. So 1756, Shiraz-ud-Dowla's troops come in and take the first battle at Baitak Khana, Sialda. I think that was the first traffic jam we had. After that, they move along this road, and they came up to a point up to near Lal Bazaar, where today's Lal Bazaar is, and started bombarding. The first major edifice that was under attack. Guess which? Next to Writers' Building is a thin steeple, tall steeple of a church. That church didn't exist in that form. It was a ballroom in the evening and a courthouse in the morning. The Brits didn't want two buildings. So that is why when you come in from Raj Bhavan side, it's called Old Courthouse Street, right at that point. So this courthouse got smashed. Writers' Building didn't exist, so there's no point in smashing, but I guess there are lots of people who could have a lot of number of views about what to do with it. So it moved on, and they started bombarding the fort. The fort being GPO, forget the GPO, the fort was there. They damaged the fort, and after that you have the story of Holwell's dark hole. Okay, move on. 1757 comes a maverick called Robert Clive. He lands up again from Fort St. George. Fort St. George has an irritating way of sending people to Calcutta. So he lands up there and he moves on. At Falta, he's told by the East India Company's men not to undertake further adventures. Moves on. He tears up the message and moves further towards Calcutta, occupies Calcutta, smashes Siraj-ud-Dowla, moves up to attack him. He had by that time worked it out with Zafar. And they meet in a village which is on the borders of Murshidabad and Nadia, Plassey. The rest is history. What happens after Plassey is very interesting. With the war compensation that the British gave him, they decide to build a new fort. So this fort is now removed from the Dalhousie Square area and taken to the village of Govindpur and wiped off. The village of Govindpur is wiped off. Go to Fort William and you'll see written next to it, under it lies the village of Govindpur. This village would be converted into Fort William. Now, Fort William is one of the books in the book of Guinness Book of World Records as one of the largest forts in the world from which a shot has never been fired in anger. All shots are ceremonial. But let me tell you about a few shots. How do the British ensure that they aren't licked again and again? So they point their guns. Incidentally, again, the gun that they got was not from Calcutta, Fort St. George. They mounted it on top of Fort William and fired it all around. Wherever it fell on the east side, habitations were razed to the ground. And that wide green would be known by the company's soldiers from the Purvia, Ara, Balia, Chapra, as the Maidan. But the Bengalis would call it Goder Mat. Nothing would be allowed to grow in this so as not to get into the way of sight of the cannons. Go on. Now, a problem was, by 1742, a new guy had appeared on the scene called the Marathas. The Marathas were desperate. And to control the Marathas, the British decided to build a huge ditch, because the Marathas were light cavalry, and the light cavalry couldn't cross over a deep moat. The moat started at Khidapur, went around in a perfect circle around Calcutta, and joined at north of Calcutta. It became a D. The moat couldn't become a perfect D. Halfway in this place called Maniktala, they were stopped. What's today is Maniktala, they were stopped. Lots of people stopped the work and said, why are we made to stay outside the fort? We also want to be part of the fort area, the protected area. So Maniktala is split into two. One part gets into the fort, that is east of Circular Road. The other part is still known as Godpad. Godpad. That's your outside. Calcutta has this fascinating history as it goes along. This ditch would be known as a great circular ditch, which would become the Great Circular Road. Circular Road. This road becomes the original jurisdiction of Calcutta. Till today, if you slap a guy near Victoria Memorial, you'd be taken to the Calcutta court of the Chief Metropolitan Magistrate. He would be known as Chief Presidency Magistrate, Chief Metropolitan Magistrate. If you slap a guy on the other side, you're taken to Alipo Court because you're in District South 24 Parganas. How do you join the two? There are lots of these issues that come up. I could go on for a long time, but I'd stop short. Now, the Chief Metropolitan Magistrate's Court had the jail near Harinbari. From Harinbari, near Lal Bazar, it would be shifted down south. And when Victoria Memorial would come up, the jail would have to be shifted outside Calcutta. When you talk of Calcutta, you mean the original jurisdiction of Calcutta, the circle. One minor problem. British law says that no magistrate can execute a sentence outside his jurisdiction. How do you get this new court and new jail in Alipo, Presidency Jail, how do you get it to be part of Calcutta? If you look back into old Calcutta's history, you'll see Calcutta has a little tail coming out near Victoria Memorial. That's called D.L. Khan Road. And it goes on and tags along with Presidency Jail. So Calcutta is a D with a little tail, because unless you brought it within Calcutta, you couldn't sentence a man. Move. Why? What would be some of the distinguishing marks of Calcutta? One of them would be that there were two primordial cults, primitive cults of Bengal, that left their mark behind. Calcutta was famous for Kali Ghat. In any case, people had to go along the pilgrim's path to Kali Ghat. And when you entered into the domain of Calcutta, people normally rested at a resting place attached to a Nath monastery or Nath place of worship. This Nath worship, place of Nath, was known after Chaurangi Baba. So those who know the Nath cult would know about Chaurangi Baba, who gave the name of Chaurangi Road. But along with that, some would prefer to come in from Boitakhana side, and they would stop at a mandir of Dharma Thakur, Dharmatala. So you now have the x-axis and y-axis of Calcutta. But Calcutta had more interesting tales. With the rate of mortality, this fellow lasted 2 years, his daughter 2 years after founding, there was a high rate of mortality. And by that time, the schisms within the English settlement had come up to the fore. With the war compensation that Charnock got, he was supposed to repair. This was the first English church, St. John's. The Scots came up and said, "Where is our church?" So with the war compensation, the Scots got their church, which was exactly where the old courthouse was, which is known as St. Andrew's Kirk. Kirk, not church. Go and see it. It's St. Andrew's Kirk. The Scots had a lot of presence in Calcutta as names like Russell, Grant. You go along the names of Calcutta and you find the contribution of the Scots. The Scots in English used to have a little bit of fisticuffs after a couple of drinks. Never mind. Where do you bury? By that time, along with the English Protestants, there were leftovers of the Roman Catholic Church. The Portuguese had left behind so many Catholics. And Protestant Catholics had just got out of their exciting phase. So we needed a place to bury. And a place to bury was required in a substantial place to bury. So bodies would be carried on from this Gur area, the fort area, and taken along, taken straight along to near the ditch, where you still have both the Protestant and the Catholic burial grounds. The road that connected them was known as Burial Ground, the Burial Ground Road. This Burial Ground Road would later on be converted into a park, a huge park, because burial ground sounds so ominous. And the only little slice of the park that we have, and park and manor that we have, is Loretta House. Loretta House is the only patch of green, and Allen's Garden, that little patch of green, is the only thing we are left out of Park Street or Mother Teresa Sarani or whatever you call it, leading to Middleton's house. That's why it's Middleton Street. So each street of Calcutta this way reeks of a past, reeks of history. This is one city that is soaked in history in such an emphatic manner that all I would urge upon you is to start looking left, right, and center and ask questions. Ask questions. There are so many books available. We had all formed a little society I joined the IAS in 1975. By 1980, I realized I was worthless for it. I stuck back. In 80, we had formed a society here called the Society for the Preservation of the History of Calcutta, quite a mouthful. So it was led by Professor Nishit Ray. It was in Theatre Road. And we had collected a lot of material that's still there. We can pass it on to any group and society. We can give you the references. P.T. Nair, has he come here today? P.T. Nair was one man who was working for a commercial paper. P.T. Nair decided to dedicate his life to finding out the history of each Calcutta. So there's a beautiful book in P.T. Nair's horrible English. It's called The Streets of Calcutta. I don't know whether it's still in publication, but every time you open up any one of them, you'll see how each place got its name and how each name can be contested. How Bahu Bazar would come in, how Baliaghata would come in. Calcutta turned from 3 villages to 38. This was got by this English doctor who cured the Nawab's daughter. And as a result, he got 38 villages. So 3 plus 38. Among these 38 are Siahal Daha, Baliaghata, and goes on. Those are the original names of Calcutta. So this is a city that had its trigger point today, 1690, on a hot, sticky, rainy day. Right from its birth, it had a lot of, it learned to take criticism in its stride. And one of the most virulent critics of Calcutta was Rudyard Kipling. Kipling was a Lahori, and he believed that Bengalis were not very exciting people, and Calcutta was a mistake. So this is Kipling's tribute to Calcutta, backhanded and smashy. Let me conclude with this little thing that he has left behind. Thus the midday halt of Chanak, more's the pity, grew a city. As a fungus sprouts chaotic from its bed, so it spread. Chance directed, chance erected, laid and built on the silt, palace, byre, hovel, poverty and pride, side by side, and up to here it's tolerable. And above, it's descriptive. But here is where Kipling gives his punchline. And above the packed and pestilential town, death looks down. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Kipling a big lie. We shall going on looking at death in the face, looking at adversities in the face, and we shall be here celebrating the centenary through 300 years, 500 years, 700 years, maybe from this building itself. We don't know. Calcutta has something that very few cities of the world have, a spirit to fight and live. With these words, I thank you for your patience, and God bless you.
find that Gautam Ghosh is a bit partial to Rita Bhimani. We had asked him to do a documentary around the same time on Tagore in Bangladesh. He was busy just after Lalan Fakir. He decided to ignore me altogether. Now I don't count for him because I've left Calcutta. Anyway, it was the bus. So we go to rope him in. Like most of Gautam's work, I have seen snippets of this. It's bound to come out well. But since I have this task of introducing the context, I've just asked you to go back not only to this day, exactly 180 years ago, when a man died in Bristol. 180? Exactly 180 years ago, and is remembered even today. More on that side, and woefully less here. That is the tragedy of Ram Mohan Roy. He's given as a prefix to the Bengal Renaissance. His name comes in a series of greats, but he's never adjudged properly as a standalone subject. There's a lot of hagiographic material, I'm sorry to use the word, half my side is Brahmo, so I can take liberties. In fact, I think that's the scholarly half, that's the better half. A lot of material is there about adorating his works, but somehow I have a feeling, having grown up in the city, that there's a consignment of this person to one sect, one group, which is absolutely incorrect. If you go back by a flashback again, you'll see that the foundations of modern India would not come instantly after the Battle of Plassey. It would take time for the empire to consolidate. The empire was led by a nation that was still floundering. It hadn't established itself as a land power. It would establish itself as a land power only in 1815, after Waterloo. So around the end of the 18th century, 1790s, we were still floundering. Our systems were still under experimentation. And we are always told that we were a nation in decay, with superstitions and a lot of vices like excess of rituals. And the point that's stressed about in Bengal, without much analysis, is that we burnt our widows. And that is where Ram Mohan comes in. Just a word about burning of widows. Why was it so peculiar, so horrific in Bengal? It was done in certain other parts of India. Why was it so focused in Bengal? Why was it so abhorrent? It was abhorrent because the practice, I would dare say, had only developed in the pre-modern, late pre-modern and modern period. And why it developed is one of the very strange quirks of history. Very strange quirks of history. Of all the country, all the states in India practice what is called the Mitakshara system of land inheritance property, which actually denies the woman a natural right. Bengal had a culture which gave an equality of position to the woman. Brahmanical jurisprudence, when it sort of set itself in Bengal, had to deviate and go in for a practice known as Daibhag, which meant that this was one of the only states where the woman could actually claim the property as a matter of right, religious right. It was all right as long as you didn't have much of property to go around. But with the arrival of 1793, with the accrual of wealth in Bengal, where I'm speaking with a little bit of repetition because there are lots of historians who bring Bharati here, but this is an angle of thought that it's only when money started flowing into Bengal and into the intermediary class, the Orthodox, the Zamindars, that there was a lot to go around. And that is the time when they found the natural claim of the widow to be rather annoying. And what could be the best way of disposing her? Especially if one chose to marry more than once. Burn them up. Horrible as it is, the Shastras were invoked, and this is where Ram Mohan plays. But another small takeoff on this, once widow burning, sati, the horrible, horrendous, inhuman practice came to a halt, Bengal took up another vice, consigning these widows to Vrindavan and Banaras for purposes that I would not like to discuss. So we let it at that. Now coming back to the man who changed it all around, it was practically a single-handed effort. People who are aware of his life would know that in the 1820s, there was hardly any Indian, I repeat myself, hardly any Indian missionary in any state, in any province, who had the gumption to stand up alone. He was not even, he is fancied around as a Raja, but that was just a title given to him by Akbar II, I think. Akbar II, he was a titular Mughal emperor. I use the word titular because by that time, as you know, in another 30 years it would all be sorted out, that it didn't matter. So just a title, but he had a struggling life on his own. And this, of course, I won't get into his life, I'll just get into the context of his life. In the 1820s, I repeat, there was hardly anyone in India who had that vision, the consolidation of thought, the capacity to interlocute with Britain and the rest of the world on terms of equality. He is the one who pointed out, he has many firsts to his credit. First, one of the firsts that we give to his credit is the word Hindu. This amorphous group of practices that passes off as neither Muslim nor Christian, but something that goes around in India, to give it a meaning, to give it an identity, the word Hindu in Western literature would first come in through Ramon. I may stand corrected, Bharati, am I right? Right. He would again be the first known Indian of consequence to be crossing the seven seas and going to England. In fact, the curse of going to England is what haunted many for the rest, because he happened to die there by meningitis. So that was taken as Kabhi Kala Pani, don't cross the black waters, black seas. So there again he comes up first. But more important for me today as an inheritor of the great liberal tradition to you and me, who stand here today, is the fact that who is it who opened the doors first? And that I would place the credit solely upon a man who was lonely all his life. He was lonely the way, he had lots, I don't know how much was brought about he had to revolt against his own Brahmanical background. And it was his own grandmother who filed cases against him. His entire community went against him, but he stuck to the thought, stuck to the belief of the original thought behind Hinduism, that's the unity of God. This had, over the last 3,000 years, got diffused in the forms of expressions, in different myriad forms and practices, rituals, idols, names, and this became the image. But behind this, behind this forest of symbolisms lay a primordial unity in the belief of a single divinity. He was the one who extracted this thought from the jungle of superstitions, the jungles of practices, and took it out, segregated it, and explained to the rest of the world through the ruling powers. There are so many firsts to his credit that it would take us several years of examination, thought, focus, films, discussions to bring him back and give him the position that Ramon deserved. He died practically unsung in Bristol. He lives thereafter half sung. Thank you.
বর্ণকান্তি বাবু, রাজশ্রী, আমাদের ভারতীদি, ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর মহোদয়, উপস্থিত বন্ধুগণ, একদম নাছর বাঁধা এই ছেলেটি স্নেহাশিস। শুধু কালেকশনও নয়, ও কবে থেকে লেগে আছে যে এটাকে পাবলিকের সামনে তুলে ধরতে হবে। এখন আমি ওর কাজের ব্যাপারটা আবছা আবছা জানি। একবার চেষ্টা করে বর্ধমান ইউনিভার্সিটির ওর হলো না, না হয়েছে অর্ধেক এগিয়েও হয় না কেন। সংস্কৃতির ব্যাপারে লোকের ধারণা তো আপনি জানেন সকলে, একটা লো প্রায়োরিটি সাবজেক্ট। উপাচার্য অবধি করা গিয়েছিল। ওর এই কালেকশন যেটা ও করেছে তার জন্য আমরা সবাই সকলের তরফ থেকে আমরা ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। কেন জানাচ্ছি একটু পরে বলছি, কেন এই প্রাইভেট এফার্টের দরকার ছিল। দেখুন, আমার কাছে হিন্দি ফিল্মের গান, এক কথা আমরা বড় হয়েছি মধ্যবিত্ত শিক্ষিত মধ্যবিত্ত বাড়িতে, বাবা ওটাকে ল্যাড়া লাপ্পা বলতেন। তো ওটা কোনো ভদ্রলোকের শোনে না, দেখে না। এই বলে আমাদের প্রথম পরিচিতি। শাস্ত্রীয় সঙ্গীত, রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত, বাকি যত রাজ্যের যত গুণী সঙ্গীত, এগুলো ভালো, হিন্দির থেকে যত দূরে থাকা যায়। তা সত্ত্বেও আমার প্রথম মেমোরি কিন্তু ঝানক ঝানক পায়াল বাজে, খুব ছোটবেলায় দেখেছি। হিন্দি সিনেমাকে কিন্তু আজকে 70 বছরের কাছে, প্রায় 60-65 বছর পরে কিন্তু আমাদের নতুন করে মূল্যায়ন করতে হবে। আমি কাকে পছন্দ করি, আমার কাছে আমার রুচিতে কোনটা বাধে, আমার রুচিতে আমার পরিবারে কি সংস্কৃতিতে আমরা বড় হয়েছি, সেগুলো ধরুন একদিকে রাখলাম, সেটা আমরা নিশ্চয়ই পোষণ করব, সেটা নিশ্চয়ই আমরা তুলে রাখবো, তুলে ধরে থাকবো। কিন্তু ভারতবর্ষের মানচিত্রে যদি আপনি তাকিয়ে দেখেন, দেখবেন পৃথিবীতে 4টি মাল্টি ন্যাশনাল স্টেট আছে। মাল্টি ন্যাশনাল স্টেট আমি যখন কথাটা ব্যবহার করছি, আমরা ধরে নিচ্ছি যে বিভিন্ন নেশনস, এখন নেশনকে আমরা কম করে একটু ডাইলিউট করে বলতে পারি যে নেশন নয়, পিপল, রেস, লিঙ্গুইস্টিক গ্রুপ, এথনিসিটি, অনেক কথা বলে আমরা ঢেকে দিতে পারি, কেন এখন তো আমরা একটা নেশন। 4টি মাল্টি ন্যাশনাল স্টেটের মধ্যে কিন্তু চরিত্র আলাদা আলাদা। প্রথম যদি আমরা তাকিয়ে দেখি, সবচেয়ে পুরনো চীন। চীনের সংস্কৃতিতে তারা বিশ্বাস করে, দে আর only certain central principles. হান জাতি, চীন ভাষা, মাঞ্চুরিয়ান, এবং চাইনিজ ইউনিটি। অতএব 80-85% চীন কিন্তু একটি ভাষাতেই কথা বলে, 90% বোধ হয়। একটি জাতি, একটি ভাষা, একটি সংস্কৃতি, একটি মূল্যবোধ। চলে আসুন রুশ, একই ব্যাপার, রুসিফিকেশন। রুশের চারিপাশে যারা ছিল তাদের সবাইকে রুসিফাই করা হয়েছে। তারা সবাই রুশ ভাষায় কথা বলে, একটি সংস্কৃতিতে বিশ্বাস করে, একটি ধর্মে তারা বিশ্বাস করত, পরবর্তীকাল আরেকটা ধর্মে চলে এসেছিল লাল পতাকার নিচে। আবার দুটো ধর্মের মধ্যে এখনো তারা একটা সমন্বয় আনার চেষ্টা করছে। কিন্তু মোটামুটি ইট ইজ এ ইউনিফাইড হোমোজেনিক সোসাইটি। একটা ভাষা সবগুলো বোঝে। চলে আসুন পৃথিবীর সবচেয়ে নতুন মাল্টিন্যাশনাল স্টেট, আমেরিকা। আমেরিকার ওই ভদ্রমহিলা যিনি হাতে ওই আপনার স্ট্যাচু অফ লিবার্টি নিয়ে দাঁড়িয়ে আছেন, সকলকে আহ্বান করছেন, তার প্রতিমূর্তি দেখে আমাদের মনে হয় যে পৃথিবীর যে কোনো রাজ্যে যে কোনো দেশের লোক ওখানে চলে যেতে পারে। ইটস আ ট্রুলি মাল্টিন্যাশনাল স্টেট, অ্যান্ড ইট ইজ অ্যাকচুয়ালি আ মাল্টিন্যাশনাল স্টেট। কিন্তু আপনারা যদি যারা আমেরিকান সংস্কৃতির মধ্যে যান, দেখবেন একটি সংস্কৃতি সেখানে প্রিভেল করে। জয়ন্ত ওখানে পড়িয়ে এসছে কদিন আগে। জয়ন্ত এখান থেকে যতখানি ইন্টারনেটে বুঝতে পারত, তার চেয়ে বেশি ওখানকার রাস্তাঘাটে বুঝে এসছে। প্রফেসর জয়ন্ত সেনগুপ্ত, এখন ভিক্টোরিয়ার আমাদের কিউরেটর। অ্যান্ড দ্যাট ইজ কল্ড ওয়াসপাইজ। কথাটি আপনাদের কাছে নতুন মনে হলো, এটি মনে রাখবেন। হোয়াইট, অ্যাংলো স্যাক্সন, প্রটেস্ট্যান্ট, এর বাইরে কিচ্ছু নেই। আমরা গেলে আমাদের একটি মেয়ে নাকি কদিন আগে ওদের মিস আমেরিকা জিতেছে, তাকে সঙ্গে সঙ্গে বলে দেওয়া হলো সে ব্রাউন, শি ইজ নট হোয়াইট, শি ইজ নট অ্যাংলো স্যাক্সন, শি ইজ নট প্রটেস্ট্যান্ট। হায় কপাল, আমরা কি করলাম। আপনার কাগজে পড়েছিলেন বোধহয়। অতএব এইগুলো কেন বলছি, এবার চলে আসতে হবে ভারতবর্ষে। 1940 সাল বা 1930-এর দশকে চলে আসুন। 1930-এর দশকে ভারতবর্ষ ছিল না, একটা জাস্ট ভৌগোলিক কনসেপ্ট। এই নিয়ে কত যন্ত্রণা রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুরের, এটা কি কোনোদিন এক হবে? বিবেকানন্দ তার 3 দশক আগে মারাই গেছেন, বলে গেল জানি না অভাগা দেশ কোনোদিন এক হবে কিনা। যারা যারা মানুষের মনে ছিলেন তারা সকলেই একই ব্যথা, আমাদের মধ্যে এত মিল, কিন্তু আমরা আলাদা আলাদা রাজ্য, আলাদা আলাদা ভাষা, আলাদা আলাদা সংস্কৃতি, আলাদা আলাদাভাবে নিজেদের দিকে দেখি। 47-এ যখন আমার প্রথম পার্টিশনের পরে ভারতবর্ষের বৃহৎ অংশ বেরিয়ে ভারত হলো, আরও দুটো অংশ ছিটকে গিয়ে অন্য একটি রাষ্ট্র হলো, আমাদের কাছে এই সমস্যা ছিল। কিন্তু আমি যে প্রজন্মে বড় হয়েছি, আমরা সকলকে ওই মাদ্রাসি, হিন্দুস্তানি, উড়িয়া, পাঞ্জাবি, আবার উড়িয়ারা ওখানে বঙ্গালী এ বলে চালিয়ে এসছি। আমি টকিং অফ মাই গ্রোয়িং আপ ইয়ার্স, আপনারা সকলেই জানেন। ব্যাপারটা কি হলো, হঠাৎ গিয়ে দেখা যাচ্ছে 30-40 বছর পরে কোথায় যেন মিক্সিতে আমরা মিশে গেছি সবাই। কারোর ছেলে মেয়ে স্বজাতির মধ্যে বিয়ে করছে না, প্রত্যেকটা দেশের প্রত্যেকটা রাষ্ট্রের ভাষা, প্রত্যেকটা রাজ্যের ভাষা আমরা বলতে মোটামুটি গ্রহণ করে নিয়েছি, কাউকে হীন চোখে দেখি না। এই যে ভারতবর্ষের মধ্যে একটা হঠাৎ একটা ইউনিটি এসে গেল, এটা তার পেছনে সবচেয়ে বড় হাত যদি আমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করেন, আমি নির্লজ্জভাবে বলবো হিন্দি সিনেমা। এটা যে অগ্রাহ্য করে, যে মানে না, তার সাথে কোনো যুক্তিতর্কের মধ্যে নামা যায় না। হিন্দি সিনেমা হলো, কিন্তু সিনেমা শুরু হয়েছিল এই শহর থেকে। এই শহরে হলো না কেন? এখান থেকে তো আমরা শুরু করেছিলাম একই সাথে। এখান থেকে হলো না আমাদের বাবু আনার জন্য। আমি এ ব্যাপারে স্পষ্ট বক্তব্য রাখি, বাবু আনার জন্য। বাবু সংস্কৃতির মধ্যে এমন একটা কৃত্রিম ভাব আছে যে লোক সংস্কৃতিকে যদি একটা স্থানও দিই, কিরম যেন কয়েক ইঞ্চি মেপে ঢুকতে দিই। লোক সংস্কৃতির সাথে মানুষের সংস্কৃতির সাথে আমরা দূরে সরে গেছি। বাবু সংস্কৃতি বা কলকাতার ভদ্রলোকের সংস্কৃতি একটা পুরোপুরি কৃত্রিম সংস্কৃতি, এ ব্যাপারে কোনো সন্দেহ রাখবেন না। আপনার যে কোনো তার এলিমেন্টটা তাকিয়ে দেখুন, পরবর্তীকালে তৈরি করা। রবীন্দ্র নৃত্যের দিকে তাকিয়ে দেখুন, ভারতনাট্যম থেকে নেওয়া, ওড়িশার থেকে নেওয়া কিছু মুদ্রা, মণিপুরের থেকে নেওয়া, বালির থেকে নেওয়া নিয়ে আমরা একটা তৈরি করেছি। এখানের যেটা আমাদের সবচেয়ে বড় অসুবিধা ছিল, যে এই কনটেক্সটে যে আমাদের 47 বা 30-40-এর দশকে আমরা কিন্তু সকলকে, এবং 30-40, আমি 50-60-এর দশকে বলছি, আমরা আলাদা আলাদা যেভাবে ধরতাম হিন্দি সিনেমার তার ভূমিকাটা হচ্ছে, আমি কিন্তু ভালো সিনেমা দেখি, আমি এখনো হিন্দি সিনেমা খুব কম দেখি। আমার স্ত্রীর পাল্লায় পরে কয়েকটি যেতে হয় ঠিকই, এখন একটা নাকুচু ভাব রাখি। কি করবো, আমাকে সেরকমভাবে হাউস ট্রেন করা হয়েছে। আপনাদের মধ্যে অনেকেই আছেন সেভাবে, আমাদের এখনো গুড সিনেমা দেখি, সিনে ক্লাব অফ ক্যালকাটা, ফিল্ম ফেস্টিভ্যাল ইত্যাদি করি, কিন্তু দ্যাট ডাজ নট detract me from the principle that the unity of India was founded on the principle of one, a national bourgeoisie, একটা মধ্যবিত্ত শ্রেণী বিভিন্ন প্রদেশ থেকে তারা একত্রিত হয়ে তারা একই ভাষায়, ইংরেজি ভাষায় কথা বলে, তারা তাদের মতামত, তাদের গণতান্ত্রিক চিন্তাধারা, তাদের স্বাধীনতার প্রতি তাদের ভালোবাসা সবকিছুকে একত্রিত করে একটা দর্শন এসেছিল। কিন্তু দর্শন ধরে রাখতে পারে না, দর্শন এগিয়ে দিতে পারে। মানুষের স্তরে যখন, নিচের জনতার স্তরে যখন আমাদের ইউনিটি আসতে হলো, এলো হিন্দি সিনেমার মাঝে। হিন্দি সিনেমার ওপর আমরা অনেকে স্ট্রেস করি, কিন্তু যেটা ভুলে যাই যে হিন্দি সুর এবং হিন্দি গান, এর মধ্যে সবচেয়ে বড় একটা মিথ্যে লুকিয়ে আছে। হিন্দি কথাটি, হিন্দির সাথে সম্পর্ক কিন্তু খুব কম। প্রথম কথা, যে ভাষায় কথা বলে সেটা হলো চলিত ভাষা, কলোকিয়াল। হিন্দি যারা বলে বেনারসের, তারা কান বন্ধ করে এইসব শুনলে, প্রথম। অতএব হিন্দি বলাটা যদি সত্যি কথা বলতে, হিন্দুস্তানি ইজ এ বেটার ওয়ার্ড, ভারতীয়। আর এই রাজ্যে হলো না কেন, তাতে আবার যদি ফিরে আসি, এই রাজ্যে যে কৃত্রিম সংস্কৃতি, তাতে কখনো কোনো স্কোপ ছিল না লোক সংস্কৃতিকে একত্রিত করা, মানুষের সংস্কৃতি একত্রিত করা। কিছু সং দেখাই আমরা মাঝে সাঝে, কিছু রনপার নিয়ে আমরা মাঝে সাঝে নাচি, কিছু লোকগীতিকে সলিল চৌধুরী নিয়ে গিয়ে আমরা তারপর হাত তালি দিই, কিন্তু আমাদের পুরোপুরি তাতে কেএল সাইগাল করুক আর বড়ুয়া সাহেব করুক আর যেই করুক, পয়েন্ট হচ্ছে উই বিলিভড ইন আ কমপ্লিটলি স্ট্রাকচার্ড অ্যাপ্রোচ টু ফিল্মস, বিশ্বের যত রাজ্যের প্রবলেম সব আমাদের সলভ করতে হবে এখানে, নারী এবং পুরুষের মধ্যে সম্পর্ক এগুলো আমাদের ঠিক করতে হবে, এবং অনেক গভীর বিষয়, অনেক চিন্তার বিষয় আমাদের সিনেমা তখনকার দিনে কনসেন্ট্রেট করতেন। ঠিক এই সময় 1930-31 সালে 31 সালে প্রথম সাউন্ড এলো হিন্দি সিনেমায়। এবার বম্বের অ্যাপ্রোচটা দেখুন। 31 সালে প্রথম সিনেমা কোনটা রে? আলমারা। আলমারার পরে হলো আমাদের এই শিরিন শিরিন ফারহাদ। আলমারা, শিরিন ফারহাদ, আর তারপরে বোধহয় ইন্দ্রসভা, এই তিনটে। প্রথমটাতে 6টা গান, পরেরটাতে 40টা গান, আর পরেরটাতে 80টার কাছাকাছি গান, আর 78টাই ঠিকই বলেছে, 78টা গান। 1931 আমাদের এখানে যখন প্রচন্ড আতলামি করছি বলা যায়, তখন কিন্তু তারা চলে গেছে গানের দিকে, and it was moving in the direction of American musicals. এখন আর একটা চিন্তার ব্যাপারে দাঁড়ালো। তারপরেই কিন্তু যেটা রেস্কিউ অপারেশন হলো হিন্দি সিনেমার মধ্যে, আমি বাংলা থেকে একটু সরে গেলাম, এখন দেখা যাচ্ছে একটা কালেকটিভ ইন্ডিয়ান এফার্ট হলো। ক্যামেরাম্যান তেলেগু, বুম মাইক ধরে আছে মারাঠি, লাইটম্যান কানাডা, স্ক্রিপ্ট রাইটার বাঙালি, অ্যাক্টিং করছে। প্রতিটি সিনেমার আমি বিশ্লেষণ করে দেখেছি, নাম পদবি যদি আমি ঠিক করে বুঝে থাকি, ইট ওয়াজ দ্য ফার্স্ট মাল্টিন্যাশনাল ইউনিফিকেশন এফার্ট, 1 নম্বর। 2 নম্বর হলো মানুষের কাছে কি করে আসা যায়। মানুষের কাছে আসার জন্য তখনকার যে স্ক্রিপ্ট রাইটার, তখনকার যারা সুরকার সাউন্ড বানাতেন, তারা আশেপাশে যা দেখেছে গ্রহণ করে নিয়েছে। নোটাঙ্কি, রামলীলা, কোলি ডান্স, কোলি মানে আমাদের মেছোদের নাচ, মেছোদের নাচ তো সবচেয়ে ভালো পর্যায়ে নিয়ে চলে গেল ববিতে, ঝুট বলে কাওয়া কাটে। তারপরে তামাশা, পার্সি স্ল্যাপস্টিক কমেডি, সব কটাকে আলিঙ্গন করে, সব ভারতবর্ষের যে সংস্কৃতি, যেটা আলিঙ্গনের সংস্কৃতি, যেটা মিশ্রণের সংস্কৃতি, যেটা গ্রহণের সংস্কৃতি, সেই সংস্কৃতিকে তুলে ধরলো হিন্দি সিনেমা, and that brought them closer to the people. তার ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ পাল্টালো, তার ডায়ালগ পাল্টালো, তার ভাব পাল্টালো। চিবিয়ে কৃষ্ণনগরের বাংলায় কেউ বলতো না, লাফড়া তো লাফড়াই দাঁড়িয়ে গেল আমাদের ভোকাবুলারির মধ্যে। কেউ একটা কথা ব্যবহার করলো, সেই কথাটাকে নিয়ে নিয়ে আমরা তার মধ্যে ঢোকাতে আরম্ভ করলাম। এই যে ভারত জোড়ো একটা আনকনসিয়াস অ্যাটেম্পট, এই অ্যাটেম্পটের সাথে কারা জড়িয়ে আছে। 1931 প্রথমে চলে গেলাম সাউন্ডে, চলে গেলাম যে সাউন্ডের থেকে মোর ইম্পর্টেন্ট হলো, মানে সাউন্ড মুভির থেকে বেশি মোর ইম্পর্টেন্ট হলো আমার দি মিউজিক দ্যাট গোজ ইনটু ইট। সিনেমা কিন্তু খুব কম লোক দেখতে পেত, পোস্টার অনেক বেশি দেখেছে, গান শুনেছে সকলে। আর এই গান বন্ধ করার জন্যে আমি যে মন্ত্রকের সাথে আছি, সেই মন্ত্রকের একটা বিরাট ভূমিকা আছে। 47-এর পরে তারা বলল যে ভারতবর্ষের সংস্কৃতি জুড়বে শাস্ত্রীয় সঙ্গীত দিয়ে, আমরা উচ্চমানের সভ্যতা, শাস্ত্রীয় সঙ্গীত ছাড়া কিচ্ছু দেখাবো না। পণ্ডিত বিভি কেসকার কালো টুপি পরে আসতেন, এই বম্বের লোকই, মহারাষ্ট্রের লোক, তিনি বললেন শাস্ত্রীয় সঙ্গীত ছাড়া আমি আকাশবাণীতে কিচ্ছু দেখাতে দেবো না, শোনাতে দেবো না। চলে গেল, বাহ, বাবা বারণ করেছে, খুব ভালো কথা। চলে গেল রেডিও সিলন, বিনাকা গীতমালা, কি রোকে বাঁধকে, আমিন সায়ানি, তাই তো মনে আছে আপনাদের? আবার ফিরে এলো বিবিধ ভারতী। আজকে আমার গর্বের, মঞ্চাহে গীত, বিবিধ ভারতী। এবং ফিল্ম সং এর এডুকেশনকে এমন একটা পর্যায়ে নিয়ে যাওয়া হলো যে পরীক্ষার থেকে বেশি জানতে হবে। অন্তাক্ষরী, তাকে ভূগোলের জিজ্ঞেস করুন কানপুরের পাশে নাগপুর কিনা, সে উত্তর দিতে পারেন, কিন্তু অন্তাক্ষরীতে বলুন সে লাস্ট লাইনটা ধরে নেবে, তাই তো? এই যে বিবিধ ভারতীর মাধ্যমে চলে এলো, পানওয়ালা বিড়িওয়ালার দোকানে 60-এর দশকে যখন ট্রানজিস্টর লেগে গেল, সব জায়গায় একই গান, সে পানও বানাচ্ছে, গলায় চিবোচ্ছে, একটু সুপুরিও খাচ্ছে, আর সাথে সাথে চলছে আমাদের গান। আজকে ভারতবর্ষের সেন্টিমেন্টাল ইউনিটি সকলের যদি বলতে হয়, আমাদের নিজেদের বিভিন্ন বিভিন্ন প্রাদেশিক সংস্কৃতি তো রয়েছে, আমরা সেগুলোকে কখনোই আমরা অগ্রাহ্য করছি না, তাকে ছোট করছি না, কিন্তু ইউনিফাইং ইউনিটি যদি হয়ে থাকে, ইটস এ হিন্দি ফিল্ম সং। আমরা এখনো যদি অফিসের কোনো পিকনিকে বা কোনো গ্রুপে সবাই একসাথে বেরোই বা কোনো কনফারেন্স হয়, যেখানে ভেঙ্কটরামন, তার পাশে বেহেরা, তার পাশে বসে আছে সুব্রমণিয়াম, তার পাশে সিং, যদি কিছু বলা হয় তখন বলা হয় রাজশ্রী গাও একটা, আর গাইতে গেলে কিন্তু আমরা হয় গজল আর নয়তো কাম ব্যাক টু হিন্দি ফিল্মস। এই যে বড় ইউনিফিকেশন রোলে এই পটভূমিকা আপনার চিন্তা করতে হবে যে কারা ওই সময়টায় জাদুকর ছিলেন। কম্পোজার হিসেবে শচীন দেব, নওশাদ, গুলশান, শঙ্কর জয়কিশন, এই আমরা সবাই মিলে পুল করে এক কথা বলতে পারি। আমরা কিন্তু গীতার কোন কোন গীতাতে কি লেখা আছে খুব বেশি সবাই জানি না, আমি তো বেশি জানি না, আমি তো অনেক বছর পড়াশোনা করেছি। বা ঋগ্বেদেতে কি লেখা আছে কেউই জানি না, আমরা বৈদিক সভ্যতার। কিন্তু এক্ষুনি যদি বলতে হয়, আমি হলে বলে দেবো 10টা নাম চাইলে এক্ষুনি 10টা হাত উঠে যাবে কন্ট্রিবিউশন। 31, 34, 36 চলছে, কিন্তু এখনো খুব কম লোক তারা ম্যাজিক ল্যান্টার্ন দেখতে যাচ্ছে, তারা বাইস্কোপ দেখতে যাচ্ছে। মিনার্ভাতে একটা বাইস্কোপ হতো, দেখতে যাচ্ছে, নড়ে নড়ে চলে। 40-এর দশকে এটা ফার্মড আপ হয়ে গেল। আচ্ছা, সেকেন্ড আরেকটা বড় ভূমিকা আছে হিন্দি সিনেমার, শুধু মানুষের কাছে মনোরঞ্জন পৌঁছানো এবং মানুষের কাছে মেমোরি ব্যাংক তৈরি করার জন্য আমি হিন্দি সিনেমাকে এই পর্যায়ে বা হিন্দি গানকে এই পর্যায়ে তুলছি না। এই শুধু সর্বভারতীয় তার একটা কন্ট্রিবিউশনের জন্য আমি তুলছি না। হিন্দি সিনেমা যেটা আর একটা বড় ভূমিকা থেকে গেল, সেটা হচ্ছে বিভিন্ন সংস্কৃতির থেকে তারা তুলে 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 টুকরো তুলে তুলে ওটার মধ্যে সংমিশ্রণ করলেন। এই যে লতা মঙ্গেশকর 34টা ভাষায় গেয়েছে, 34টা ভাষায় গেয়েছে। আমার মনে আছে যে পুজোর সময় আমরা এমন একটা পর্যায়ে চলে গেছিলাম যে ফোনোগ্রাম নাকি বলে, এত গ্রামাফোন এত বড় একটা কিনেছিলাম, রেডিওগ্রাম, হ্যাঁ ভুলে গেছি, রেডিওগ্রাম এত বড় একটা তার একটা কাভার ছিল। আর তার জন্য সবাই আমরা ঠিক করলাম পুজোর কোনো কাপড় নেব না। লতা মঙ্গেশকরের গান, পুজোর গান, একটু বোঝা যেত যে বাঙালি, স্লাইট কান রাখলে একটা দুটো কথা বোঝা যেত, কিন্তু একদম ধরা যেত না। একদম মানে একটা দুটো কথা আছে, তো আমার তার চেয়ে বিকৃত, আমি অনেক কথা শব্দে বিকৃত হয়ে যায় আমারও। আশ্চর্য এই যে তারা সর্বভারতীয় একটা শুধু নিল না, গ্রহণ করলো না, তাকে আরো উন্নত করলো, তাকে মানুষের কাছে ফিরিয়ে ধরলো। এই একই প্রিন্সিপালে আমাদের, এই একই নীতিতে আমাদের ভারতবর্ষের আগের যে ইউনিটি সেটা হয়েছিল। রামায়ণ ছিল একটি জাতক কাহিনী, আপনার গঙ্গ উপত্যকার একটি জাতক কাহিনী। জাতক মানে একটি লোক সংস্কৃতি থেকে একটা গল্প, লোকগীতি, সেটা লোক কাহিনী, সেটা থেকে তুলে নিয়ে বৌদ্ধরা জাতক করলো, জাতক থেকে আরও তার উন্নত করা হলো, আস্তে 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 গিয়ে আমরা একটা বিশাল রামায়ণ পেলাম। জাতকটি গিয়েছিল, সে রাম সীতা গিয়েছিল হিমালয়ের দিকে, এরা চলে গেল দক্ষিণের দিকে, সবাই জানে, ইতিহাসটা সব ছাত্রই জানে। মহাভারত ছিল সুতারদের গান, সন্ধ্যেবেলা ওই কি বলে আগুন জ্বালিয়ে ঠেকুয়া বানিয়ে রামাহক যখন গাইতো তখনকার জয় বলে গানটির প্রথম নাম জয়। জয় বাড়তে বাড়তে জয় হলো, জয় থেকে গিয়ে হলো ভারত, ভারত থেকে মহাভারত, একটা কমপ্লিট কোলাবোরেটিভ এফার্ট। এই কোলাবোরেটিভ এফার্ট যেটা আমাদের মহাকাব্য গেল, এই একটা বৃহত্তর কোলাবোরেশন নেক্সট কিন্তু আমরা 40, 50, 60, 70 গিয়ে আমরা দেখলাম হিন্দি সিনেমার গান বা বোম্বাই ভিত্তিক গান। আমার হিন্দি সিনেমা বলতে ভালো লাগে না, কেন তার মধ্যে সব ভাষায় আছে, সব ভাষায় ঢুকে গেছে, সব কথাই ঢুকে গেছে, সব সুর ঢুকে গেছে, সব সংস্কৃতি ঢুকে গেছে, তার প্রত্যেকটি কালচারাল এক্সপ্রেশন ঢুকে গেছে। এই যে ভাইব্রেন্সি, এরপরে আমরা চিকেন বাটার মশলার সাথে তন্দুরি খেতেও রাজি আছি, দোসা খেতেও রাজি আছি। ফার্স্ট ইউনিটের হয়ে গেল, সেকেন্ড ইউনিটের পর তো ক্রিকেট আসবে, আইপিএল আসবে, টিভি আসবে, রামায়ণ আসবে, মহাভারত আসবে, দূরদর্শন আসবে, এসব আসবে। এগুলো সেকেন্ডারি, পরবর্তীকালে দে উড র্যাপ আপ দ্য হোল গেম। কিন্তু অ্যাট দ্য কোর অফ দ্য ইউনিটি অফ ইন্ডিয়া লাইজ দ্য কন্ট্রিবিউশন অফ স্টলওয়ার্ডস। তাদের মধ্যে লিভিং স্টলওয়ার্ড আজকে যদি ধরে রাখা যায় যে পুরো চেঞ্জটাকে দেখলো। 1942-এ তার প্রথম বোধে হিন্দি সং, মারাঠি না, 42 মারাঠি বাবা মারা যাওয়ার পরে মারাঠাতে প্রথম গাইছেন, তারপরে মারাঠির থেকে তিনি চলে গেলেন বোধহয় উস্তাদ আমানাত আলীর কাছে। আমানাত আলীর কাছে গিয়ে শাস্ত্রীয় সঙ্গীতে এটা বেস করলেন। শাস্ত্র থেকে আমরা কেউ পালাতে পারবো না, শাস্ত্রীয় সঙ্গীত থেকে কেউ পালাবার চেষ্টাও করেন, রবি ঠাকুরও চাননি। উনি পুরোটাই শাস্ত্রীয় রাগের ওপর বেস করেছেন, কারণ দ্যাট ইজ আওয়ার ভোকাবুলারি, দ্যাট ইজ আওয়ার গ্রামার, সিনট্যাক্স, তার উপর থেকে বার বেরো যাবো বা কেন। কিন্তু তাকেই নিয়ে একটা ভগর পর্যায়ে নিয়ে যাওয়াটা একটু বাড়াবাড়ি হয়ে যায় মাঝে সাঝে। এইখানে গিয়ে উনি 42 থেকে টানা 45-এ 48-এ গিয়ে ফার্স্ট মেজর হিট। আচ্ছা, সেখানে ছোট্ট গল্প বলে শেষ করছি, কারণ আমি এই বক্তৃতা আরম্ভ করেছি, আমার প্লেন ধরতে হবে এখন। সেটা হচ্ছে শশধর মুখার্জি, এস মুখার্জি, হ্যাঁ, ফিল্মালয় শহীদ সিনেমার জন্য তার গলা, হ্যাঁ, ফিল্মিস্তানে শহীদ সিনেমার জন্য তার গলাটি শুনে বলল, এটা ভীষণ পাতলা, কেমন একটা জানো। হায়দার, তিনি তখন তার পৃষ্ঠপোষক ছিলেন, প্রথম পৃষ্ঠপোষক মাস্টার বিনায়ক। মারা যাওয়ার পর হায়দার সাহেব বললেন, গোলাম হায়দার গিয়ে বললেন, শশধর বাবু আপনি যা বলার বলুন, এই মেয়েটির পায়ে পড়বে ভারতবর্ষের লোকেরা। শশধর ও জাজমেন্ট সেদিন ভুল প্রমাণ হলো। ভারতবর্ষের লোকেরা আজকে, আজ থেকে নিয়ে 100 বছর পরে, যখন লতা মঙ্গেশকরের ইতিহাস, যখন ফিল্মে তার সাথে জড়িয়ে আছে পুরো হিন্দি সিনেমার ইতিহাস, তার সাথে জড়িয়ে আছে হিন্দি নৃত্য, হিন্দি গান, এবং সেই গানের সাথে জড়িয়ে আছে ভারতবর্ষের একটা ইউনিফিকেশন, ভারতবর্ষের একত্রীকরণের ইতিহাস, যখন আমরা 100 বছর পরে খুঁজে বার করতে পারবো, তখন আমরা এই ছেলেটির দিকে তাকিয়ে বলবো যে ভাগ্যিস কয়েকটা রেখে দিয়েছিল। এই বলে আমার বক্তব্য শেষ করছি। নমস্কার।
Respected Swamiji, respected seniors in the audience, my friends, I see quite a few of them. প্রত্যেকে দেখা মুশকিল। It's always nice to come back home. I look for an occasion to come back to Calcutta. My present job doesn't permit me so much flexibility because Prasar Bharati has under it 470 radio and TV stations, out of which only 2 are located in Calcutta. So the proportion is a little unbalanced if you look at it. I am extremely grateful to the mission and to the Sarag Memorial for this opportunity. There were 2 specific reasons why I agreed to speak on the subject. It's perhaps not the most popular subject as of now. We are all passing through a period of public gloom about public institutions, all of them, legislature, parliament, executive. You see somebody getting arrested every day. Judiciary, certain comments being made at the highest level, and of course the press. We hear of a press editor being caught on camera, etc. So the respect for institutions or the regard for institutions is at perhaps the lowest after independence in the last 2-3 years. That in a way is a development that we need to take note of, not get frustrated. We have 82,000 newspapers in India. So people who think they can't read 4 newspapers a day may kindly take note. Out of which, even if 10,000 are active, you know what that means. This is one of the most vibrant expressions of democracy any place in the world has. All over the world, many newspapers are not of that high quality. So there is no need to get frightened with either the numbers or the quality. Readership is around 18 crore. Television, we have 48 channels at now. So people who struggle with their remote controls for remote control for trying to locate one among 100 channels may also kindly take note. This is the choice we have. Actually, out of them, about 450 to 500 are active in different languages. And since it costs money to get into the dish TV or the cable operations, you see about 100, thankfully. This number, in my humble opinion, can't stay this big. It was like the early days of private airlines when everybody had a Skycraft, this carrier, that carrier. Ultimately, they compete each other out and you're left with only 4. Internet users, because that is another form of media that's going to take over. Internet users are 18 crores and active mobiles are said to be 730 million or 73 crores. Right. The size of the industry is moving from 82,000 crores. When we talk of money, 82,000 crores at present, covering print, radio, TV, films, then digital media, and slated to become 1,66,000 crores, more than double in exactly 5 years. This is, in a very short, swift, the coverage of the media. From the glory of India, from the highest, best moments of Mary Kom, to accidents, to political struggles, everything is now visible. When we fought out on the streets or in the gates of our college, there were no photographers. Kirtibankar, there were no photographers. Now, if you manage to push someone, you come out on the newspapers the next morning or on TV. Right now, I dread to open the papers. Rape, murder, scam. And then there are these TV channels which assume that the nation... Shuranjan, you're marked late. Come up. Honorable Vice Chancellor has finally come. Let us give him a hand for coming late. তোমার অ্যাটেন্ডেন্স হবে না আজকে হ্যাঁ ও অ্যাটেন্ডেন্স কাটে তো সবাই নন কলেজিয়েট ডিসকলেজিয়েট করে দেয় আচ্ছা সো the nation wants, the nation demands and all that, the form of presumptive, let us say, opinion making. This one is very interesting, but the question that arises is there a silver lining out of this cacophony, out of this high decibel sounds? Let's move on. During the Commonwealth Games, just a few days before starting, one cameraman found one toilet or one spittoon. I've never been able to understand what he photographed. And that went ballistic all over the world. In the Commonwealth Games, this is the state of our preparation. We saw that toilet piece, ugly looking toilet piece, at least 500,000 times. And then follows water seepage. Rain gods were also not very kind to the organizers, so they came in full fury. Everything started leaking. Public fury went up. And it ended only when their chief organizers were sent to uncomfortable places. You find a period when both TV and the print media compete with each other to bring out more and more public scandals. The Nanda, BMW, mentioned Jessica Lal, Nitish Katara, match fixing, all of these started coming out, including that sting operation upon a leader who was taking cash. But from 2010, October, the history of India changed. Till 2009, September, till 2009 and early part of 2010, India was willing to live with Satyam, despite the fact that thousands of people had lost their savings. But 2010, something happened. The thread snapped. And after that, there was no looking back. The flop side, the other side of this story is that it began whetting an appetite that we must need a head a day. This used to happen during the French Revolution. Place de la Concorde, where the guillotine would come down every day so that the mob could enjoy. Somebody আজকে বলিতে কাউকে চড়াতে হবে. Somebody has to go today. That sort of thing. This is not very, very healthy. There are crooks, but the intensity, Now, Commonwealth Games, I had mentioned 2G, Colgate, Augusta Westland. It can go on. Let's see. Next. Kalke Prakash show. Next. Okay. This one is one of my favorites. I was asked in many places of the world, how is it that India remains the only democracy between the Atlantic and the Pacific? If you shut your eyes for a minute and look at the map of the world, leave out Europe, start from Casablanca, Morocco, go along the whole sub-Saharan belt, forget Saharan belt, go along the Western Asian, Northern Africa region, Central Asia, come to the Indian subcontinent and go all the way up to Philippines, you'll find the common punctuator of democracy has been those tanks. Every country in the world has had tanks coming out for practice every few years, whether it be Thailand, whether it be Pakistan, whether it be Bangladesh, whether it be every country. The only country which did not allow tanks to come out onto the streets is India. Remember that. And why? Because the liberal democratic class, despite all its differences, had such a common hatred for being ruled by the barracks that at no occasion, never was any occasion provided for coming out. Even if the exercises got a little showy, questions were raised as to why are we seeing so many people. There's a hypersensitiveness about it. This has happened. I need not emphasize on it. People have been threatened. But it's managed to ward off censorship and has won. A few exceptions, they are now history. They are now history. These three components of keeping the army back in its barracks and respecting them, giving them the due regard and respect, especially, let's say, after Uttarakhand tragedy. It was the army that came up much more, according to reports, than, let us say, the civil administration. Next. But as we're ending this presentation, we have to admit that the fourth pillar of democracy, other than the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, the fourth pillar is also collapsing. This is a source of worry to all of us. Media monopolies, corruption. Okay, back. Media monopolies is what is called cross-holdings. Every major media group is moving in the other direction. I know one media group that owns TV, many TV stations, in several languages, owns an English language newspaper and some Hindi newspapers, Marathi newspapers, controls the MSO and LCO, that is cable and other networks, has its own dish TV. It's a complete control of all the verticals of media. There are other groups that are moving in the same direction, from the print to the electronic to further developments, including the new media, new and social media. The other backward integration has also begun when you have anyway, I won't go in for such great examples. All I'm saying is that media monopolies have started appearing, and if no probity or no citizens' check is put on this, we may land from the frying pan of bad governance to the fire of media monopoly. So between the Colossus and the Leviathan, the choice is very thin. Corruption. Corruption, I need not emphasize. My friends in the media know about what I'm talking about. There are newspapers that just give accreditation cards and say, "Jao, earn your keep and get me advertisements." No salaries. How do you expect the man to live? This is exactly what the British did when they gave those Tawzi papers and said, "Vasool karke lao, we'll see. I've given you the rights over the Tawzi of 4 or 5 villages. You do what you feel like." Politics. The ambition of most media heads, most, I'm not talking of all, is to enter parliament. I don't know how many you have from here. Everywhere this is happening. So the dividing line between media and its better known executive and legislature is breaking down. And witch hunts. Once they get wild after someone, there is no rationality. I can say at the cost of whatever anyone feels like, that one of the witch hunts I know personally was about a CVC, Central Vigilance Commissioner, called Thomas, who was practically hounded out from his post. Thomas may be a foolish person or a simple person. I know Thomas was not dishonest. He had a case flung on him by his colleagues and others in intra-colleague rivalry in the Palmolin case. But we know, you know amongst your society, I know among my society who's corrupt and who's not. But the way he was hounded out was a sad story. So witch hunts. Next. And now we are moving to another trend where you will get convergence of all media coming in, and the entire paradigm of media will shift. Every newspaper has now a digital version with a photo or something attached. There are many people who don't buy the newspaper, simply click open the website and see it, web page. Every web page tries to get in for a backward integration. What is happening is, ultimately we are all finding, people who are dealing with the media, that the most fluid instrument we have at our command is the mobile handset. In the mobile handset, the numbers had gone up to 850 million, has come down to 780 million. It doesn't matter. Active sets, activated sets, for which you have payments and regular communication, may be in the range of 700, 750. But that's more than half the population. Now, where we are heading is that we are now moving to the mobile generation. I mean mobile in two senses. A generation that is always on the move, and that includes old people like us. We reveled at the fact that when the computer became a personal instrument, until then the computer was a large fixed instrument. You go to Jadavpur University, you'll still see it, and very slow in processing. But with the chip and other miniaturization, the computer became a personal instrument, personal computer, PC. Very soon you'll have the laptop, very soon you'll have this LED screen. But right now, the way it's heading, everything has to be in the handheld mobile. The question is, can the mobile give you that comfort of the eyes? Answer is no, but it serves a purpose. You don't have to go back and open a big clumsy newspaper. It serves its purpose. So you have something between a mobile and a laptop and a notebook. It's called the tablet, phablets and all that. Last week, the news was that tablet sales in India have crossed mobile sales. Between the mobile and the tablet, they follow the same principle of broadcasting. They follow the same principle of telecommunication. We are now standing at about 700 million potential customers. We have to stream it. There are two ways of doing it. One is using the broadcast bandwidth, and the other is to use a telecom bandwidth. Fact remains, I won't bore you with these details. Exactly 5 years from today, news will not come to the publisher. News viewers will not come to the TV. The TV and the news would have to run after the viewer. And a viewer would have the luxury of seeing it on a big screen or playing on a big font-sized home computer, perhaps only on Sundays. So that is one development that one needs to keep in watch. Everything is now integrated into, from the songs, you don't need, frankly, you don't need an iMusic. You can open any mobile set can have it. So the mobile is turning out to be a new paradigm that we have to learn how to handle, the mobile and the tablet. Any mental block or revolt on the mobile or tablet, that I can just take a call, আমি SMS, আমার শাশুড়ি মা বসে আছেন, আমি SMS করতে জানি না, you can get away, but ultimately we are moving in a direction when everything is going to come up. I have a particular experiment coming up in the next 6 months. It is called DVB-T2 or Digital Terrestrial Technology. We'll try it out in Bombay first. We have terrestrial transmitters. We are trying to get something of receptors into the mobiles. It's like a pen drive. If you attach that, it's called dongle, you'll be getting the airwaves straight in. telecast straight in. Question is, how many channels do we get in? What are the channels? So we are going through the economics of it all, whether it's going to be saleable, but it has worked in many other countries. If it clicks in India, we now put another channel of communication other than newspaper, telephone, cables, satellite, and we open another front that is through the mobile. I see everything converging from data to news to computer to sound, music, everything converging in the mobile. With these few words, I've taken a lot of your time and patience. I hope we've been able to go over the subject and bring forward to you some of the brighter aspects of the media. Thank you very much for your patience.